start recording. So yeah, let's do some sound designing. So like I said, I'm using Vital. I have a basic project set up. All it has is the bare essentials, drums, some really basic mixing, and these notes that I have here is just me doing one take of playing some notes, just so I don't have to draw them in one by one later. It's just a random Rhodes e-piano sound. We're not going to be actually using it. It's just a placeholder. The most important thing is this chord I have right here. As you can see, there's no sound on it. So if I play it, pure silence, because I don't have a synth on it. So let's put it in Vital, and as you can hear right off the bat, here's how it's going to sound like. Pretty terrible, right? So it's pretty bad. It's just
basic, but it's not terrible.
Right. It's pretty basic.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you can get pretty far with just this. Like, I think if you guys remember DJ Skull's Falling in Love Again, it's using this exact sound. Like, it's just like, I can't play it because I don't have a MIDI keyboard, but trust me, it's this exact sound. Anyway, so let's first talk about, I guess, what this plugin looks like. So first things first, you see that this kind of area right here in the top right is going into the red. That's the volume meter. That means it's clipping. So let's first of all just turn down the volume, because I'm playing big chord stacks. So there's a lot of notes, like I think like 5 or 6 notes. Like I'm playing sevenths and other crazy stuff with the chords. So it's just a lot of notes and making it very loud. So let's just turn it down, make sure it's not clipping. And now we can actually move on to the cool stuff. So right here, these are what's known as oscillators. As you can see, there's 4. This bottom one looks a bit different from the top 3, but it's still technically an oscillator. What's an oscillator? It basically lets you make sound. It's what generates the sound coming out of the synth. If I turn them all off, as you can see, they're all off now. Nothing comes out. If I turn them on, see, that's the first one right there, oscillator 1. Now it makes this sound. And if you've ever seen this shape right here, this is the saw tooth. I guess that's the full name, but people just call it the saw wave, because it looks kind of like a saw. I don't know how people see that, but just trust me, it looks like a saw. And it sounds like this. If I play one note, it sounds like that. Really basic, but it's something. It gives us like a fundamental building block to start out with. So I guess let's start off making a nice, like, luscious chord synth. So in order to do that, one of my favorite techniques in synthesizers is often something called unison, which you can see like right here, something called labeled unison, which does it for us. We don't have to manually set it up. We can just turn these knobs and it'll do it for us. So what it does is, if you've ever heard a chorus of people, you have many people singing the same note sometimes, but no one can hit that note perfectly. So they're all like a little bit off, and they're all like spaced out around you, so the sounds are coming from every which direction, which this tries to emulate. If I turn this up, you can see it in this little tiny display. It's kind of hard to see, I imagine. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. But in this tiny little display, oops, not that one. You can see as I turn this up, it looks like it's getting thicker, like there's more lines appearing. The reason is because when I have one, it's just one copy of the saw. So it just sounds like the saw we heard before. But if I add 2, oops, now there's 2 of them, and you can hear they sound off because they're detuned. They're not playing this note perfectly. One's a little bit higher, one's a little bit lower in terms of pitch. And that sounds pretty terrible on its own, but we can turn the amount of detune up and down with this slider right here, which creates really cool effects. So for example, if I turn it way up, it sounds terrible, right? Just complete dissonance. If I turn it down, now we get something a bit more musical. Sounds kind of funky, but more musical, right? You can totally use this for a lot of things already. I'm going to turn it pretty high up. Let's just do 10. Doesn't really matter. Maybe turn this up again. See, now it sounds really luscious. So let me show you how it sounds like before. Yep, turn all the way down. Pretty boring, but if I turn it up, nice and luscious. So it kind of gives you that kind of chorus effect, as if you have lots of people singing that same note in front of you, which is really cool. And so if I played it in context of all the chords of all the notes in the chords, it sounds really thick now, right? That sounds pretty good. Turn back. Really mono, really boring, really stale. Kind of sounds lame, right? Up. Whoa, now we got this like space right in front of it. Sounds luscious, right? Which is cool already. But we can do more. Let's stack a few of these on top of each other. So right now these are all playing, if I just play one note, these are all playing the same note, all 10 of these voices, but a little bit off. If I then turn on the second oscillator, I can do the exact same thing. So let's turn it up to like 10 again. But here, this little thing right here doesn't tell you directly, but if I hover over it, you can see it says transpose. That's the pitch of this oscillator in relation to the note I'm playing. So for example, if it's 0, that means it's 0 notes away from the note I'm playing, if that makes sense. But if I turn it up to 12, as you might know, 12 notes is an octave. So now, let me turn the first one off just so you can hear it. Let me turn it back to 0. You can hear that it sounds like this note right here. Turn it back up to 12. So it's an octave up now. It sounds like an octave higher, right? Even though I'm playing the same note. The reason this is cool is because now I can give it more thickness, I guess is the right word. Because now I have saws playing here, and then I have saws playing an octave up. So that fills up the space, the frequency spectrum of what you hear a little bit better. And so now here's how it sounds like in context. So before, after. It's not as dramatic of a difference as we saw from me just turning the first oscillator on, but it still adds a bit more, like I said, thickness to the sound. I don't like it a whole lot, so I'm gonna turn it down. This is like the volume of this oscillator right here. So as you can see, I have 2 oscillators on, and so now they're both working together to create a sound. It's like almost as if I have 2 copies of the synth open. So I turn it down now, sounds pretty good. And I guess we can move on to the rest of the interface of the plugin called Vital that I'm using right now. So, as you can see, there's 3 oscillators. They all do the same stuff as I showed you that the first one and the second one can do. This bottom right here is special because it doesn't play like a normal sound like the sawtooth we saw on the very top. It plays noise. So if I just turn them off, noise, right? Pretty boring. But the reason this is so useful is because oftentimes you do want a little bit of like noise to layer on top of your sounds. Maybe I'll show that later today, but just good to know, right? Oops. And then over here, let me turn these back on so you can actually hear something. Right here are the filters. These are basically like EQs or other filters that you've seen other plugins and other things, right? I'm sure you guys have all seen this before, but basically this sounds like a filter, just like how you expect it, right? Like here's a low pass filter, so it's cutting off all the high frequencies, and I can go through these other filters right here. For example, here's a steeper one, great. And what's unique about Vital is you can transition smoothly between the different filters. For example, this is a low pass filter. Oops, that's the wrong knob. Here's the band pass filter, which is just cutting off both high and low frequencies. And then here, high pass filter, so now it's cutting off all the low frequencies. So you can transition between them. You can find like a nice sweet spot. Maybe you want a combination of both or something. Whatever you like, you can do it. I'm gonna stick with a really basic one and just go with the low pass filter. I'm gonna go with a not so steep curve. Actually, stick with the steeper one. This knob right here is the resonance, so you can kind of visually see, which is what I love about this plugin. You can visually see exactly what every single knob is doing. So here you can see that this resonance knob kind of creates a peak right before it starts to roll off, which sounds like this. Kind of gives it like a vowel-y sound, right? Like it almost sounds like it's going through somebody's mouth or something. So if I turn it down, I don't have that accentuated vowel-y sound anymore. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. Like if you want to give your sound a bit more, I guess, naturalness to make it sound more human, that's what you do. Let's turn that down because I don't want to go too crazy with that. And it'd be cool if I can have it move like this automatically, right? Like I can create some really interesting like wobbly effects and whatnot. Luckily you can. Over on the right half side of the plugin, there's all these like weird things and knobs or whatever. So let's just focus on this little area right here where the LFOs are. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. No one cares about what it actually stands for. Just know what it does. It basically, as I play the sound, as you can see, like there's kind of like it kind of cycles through it, right? Basically, I don't know how else to explain it, just cycles through it. What's really cool about Vital is you can literally just click and drag the different LFOs onto whatever knob or parameter or slider you see. So for example, this slider right here changes the low pass. It changes what frequency it's affecting. So if I literally just drag the LFO onto this, I think I dragged it onto the wrong thing. No, I did it. There we go. So if I drag it onto this slider, now this LFO will be controlling the slider. What does that mean? That. So as you can see, as this is going up, so is the filter. As it's going down, so is the filter. So it's literally matching all the movements. And what's even cooler is I can completely control how this looks. So if I want to do something crazy and just, just destroy the whole thing, there you go. That's a cool little thing right there. And you can make really cool rhythms and other effects that kind of change your sound over time, which is super important because you can do a lot of, you can add a lot more movement to your music. You can add really cool transitions. You can just do so much with it. It gives your sound so much more character if you add movements like this using LFOs. I'm actually not going to use it right now because I want to keep the sound super basic. And these envelopes are very similar. The difference between them is, let me make the LFO shorter. So let me put it back on there actually. So the difference between LFOs and envelopes you'll see in a second. See, once the LFO reaches the end, it loops back to the start. So it's like looping over and over and over as long as the sound is playing. The difference between LFOs and envelopes is if I add an envelope to the filter instead, let's actually use a different, let's use envelope 2. And let's make it different, so let's make it kind of like this. It only happens once. Once I play a note, it only happens once. So as long as I hold it down, it'll never go back up because you can see the shape of the envelope is just like spiking down. So I can make it even more exaggerated if I do this. See, just once. Which is cool too because sometimes you want a lot of like instruments and stuff, you pluck them and at first they sound really loud and they kind of go down in volume over time, like guitars, pianos, etc., etc. So that's a great way to do that. In fact, most people don't know this, but envelope 1 by default is responsible for the volume of the whole entire synth. So for example, if I do this and make it kind of spiky again, let me turn this back up so you can actually hear it. You can hear that the volume goes down over time as like the shape of the envelope dictates, which is really cool. So if you want to quickly add like a bit of pluckiness or whatever to your sound, you can do it in like 2 seconds by just doing this. I think I made it too short so you can't even hear now, but yeah. There you go. That's a cool little plucky sound right there. So you can do a lot, even with just the tool I showed you. Like you can do so much, which is really cool already. I've been kind of ignoring the specific knobs and things that relate to the different parts of the GUI of the plugin. Sorry. So for example, but going back to LFO, you can see that there's a few different knobs that are connected to the LFO, and these are pretty important because they can drastically change the behavior of the LFO. So for example, the mode is basically how the LFO operates, for lack of a better term. So for example, trigger means that as soon as I start playing a note, it'll always start at the beginning. So let me put it on something so you can actually see it move. So as soon as I hit the beginning of a note, it starts at the beginning of the LFO, no matter which note or when I hit it. Always starts at the beginning. If I do sync, now it's in sync with the DAW's BPM. So for example, right now it's at 150. So what that means is I can press a note and it will just keep looping, which is really useful because sometimes you don't want things in relation to when you hit the note. You want things in relation to the rest of the project, which is why this is useful. It's kind of hard to explain exactly how it works, but I think you guys will get the gist of it with just playing around with it. And you can always just try the different options and see which one sounds the best. And as you can see, there's one right here called envelope, which guess what? Makes it behave exactly like these envelopes up here. The difference is envelopes, you only have these knobs to control it with, but as you saw with LFO, I can literally draw in any shape I want. And so now I can make a really interesting looking envelope, which I can't do up here. So yeah, pretty cool. What else? And this right here obviously changes the speed of the envelope. So as if I turn it up, now it's going like super fast. Let me turn it back to trigger. Now it's going super fast, like it's going boom. And if I turn it back down, much slower. So you can change the speed, and you can even change the relationship between this and the project. So for example, if I do tempo, which is what it is right now, this is like the type of note. So for example, right now it's set to quarter note. So this whole thing from start to finish is the length of a quarter note. If I change it to half, now it's a half note. If I change it to seconds, for example, now this whole thing lasts half a second, or I can change it to 44 milliseconds. So now this whole thing lasts 44 milliseconds. So you can go crazy. You can do a lot of different stuff. There's some other options here which you can mess around with. They're kind of self-explanatory, but feel free to tinker with it yourself. Half the fun with stuff like this is going in and just trying it out. Like, ooh, I wonder what that does, and just trying and see what it does. Like, I've never really tried these knobs before, But give it a shot. Like, who knows? Maybe it'll make your sound even cooler. Worst case scenario, you press Control Z or Apple Z, and you're back to where you started. Not a big deal. So yeah, let's keep on going. And if you've ever used any kind of synthesizer, you'll see these controls right here are very familiar. Attack, hold, decay, sustain, whatever. You can turn the knob and you can see what it's doing to the shape, which is what I really like about this plugin. You can visually see what the heck all these knobs do. And so attack, as you can see, kind of makes it slope up, so it doesn't immediately start at the peak. It kind of takes time to get there. So if I turn the filter back on, you can see it doesn't immediately start over here. It kind of starts in the middle here, where I have it set. And I can turn it down, and now you can see that the attack is all the way down, and now it does start at the very peak. It starts, now the filter starts over here, instead of over here. And then all these knobs, you can also see what they're doing. Hold just makes it so it stays at the top longer. Decay kind of changes the length of the tail. Sustain changes the volume of the tail. So for example, if you turn the sustain all the way up, now there's no tail. If I turn the sustain down, now there's a lot of tail. And you can see, as I press the note, you can see it kind of cycling through over time through the envelope and see what it does exactly. And sometimes you'll notice that when you press a note, and even if I let go, right now if I'm letting go, it immediately stops the sound. But if I turn up this release knob, even when I let go, the sound continues to go for a little bit longer. So the difference between decay and release is release happens after you let go, decay happens while you're still hitting the notes. That's the difference. It's okay if you forget it, because guess what? You can just mess around and see what these knobs do for yourself. So you don't have to like write this down or study for a test or anything. Just feel free to mess with this stuff. It's so fun. So yeah, that's basically all the important stuff is for the envelopes and LFOs. Like I said, these will give your sound so much more characteristics. Like straight up, just turn them on any knob, see what they do. I don't know, like turn them on this thing right here. What does that do? Not a whole lot, whatever, just remove it. Turn on some other sounds. Let's see what other, the volume right here, bam. Now I'm controlling the volume directly, so I can do this. So now it's controlling the volume. Like you can just throw in literally any knob, any slider, or anything you see in this plugin, which is super cool. Yeah, and also, as you can see, I'm using basic saw waves, which are boring. Like nobody cares about saw waves that much. So if you click where it says init right here, which stands for like initial or whatever, you can see that there's like a lot of different things to choose from. What are these? These are different shapes. So for example, I click on this one called basic shapes. Okay, that looks like a sine wave, because guess what? It is. If I play it right now, remember we have 10 of them playing at the same time, so if I turn back down to 1, now you just hear the notes of the chords pretty distinctly. And that's like a pretty basic, let me turn this back to how it was. Okay. So yeah, this basically is a sine wave. You've probably heard them a bunch before. And what's really cool is you might see this slider right here. What does it do? Let's try moving it, see what happens. Whoa, it changes the sound, right? So basically all these things right here is not just one shape. It's actually many of them like stitched together, and you can cycle through them using this slider right here. So for example, if I choose a different one like harmonic series, you can see now my options are completely different. And if I choose a different one, once again, completely different. So like I said, clicking one of these doesn't just change, doesn't just include one shape, it includes many different shapes. What does it sound like? Well, let's find out. That sounds kind of weird. You can just cycle through them and find cool sounds. So basically these are going to be like your building blocks of whatever sound you're trying to make. And so you can choose one that kind of closely emulates what you hear in your head or what sound you want to try and remake. And this will help you greatly further on, because like if you start with a sound that's already pretty close to what you hear in your head, it'll make your life way easier. So I'm just going to be boring and just stick with the saw wave. So I think there's one in here. Bam, saw wave. So back to where we were. Let me turn this back up. I actually kind of like this sound because it sounds really luscious and fills up the space really well. So it's a great sound for like a chord, which is, guess what I'm playing right now. But we can do a little bit better. First of all, you can't really hear on these speakers, but trust me when I say that this sound kind of lacks presence in the sense that it kind of sounds like it's washed out and just surrounding you, but you kind of want something solid, something down the middle. And the easiest way to do that is just to add a third oscillator. And instead of turning up the unison, like I've done for the previous two, I'm just going to keep it at the basic setting, so it's just playing one saw wave. But it's kind of keeping it, it's going to ground all the other ones. So that way it's kind of playing down the middle, it's solid, it's like basically rooting everything down. Like I said, kind of hard to hear through these speakers, but put on headphones, listen to like a good pair of studio monitors, and you'll hear exactly what I'm saying. I'm going to turn it down so it's not super in your face, but it'll just add a bit more solidarity to the sound. Alright, cool. And well, what are these? These are like different tabs that we can click on. Interesting. So the tab that we were just on is the voice tab. Has everything you see, everything I just showed you. Cool. Effects tab is what you're used to. Like in Ableton, you can literally just drag and drop effects down here where my mouse is, and you can do the exact same thing as what this window allows you to do, is to add effects. So the reason you would want to do the effects in here instead of just in your DAW, whether you're using FL Studio, Ableton, Logic, whatever, is because when they're in here, you can once again attach these LFOs and stuff to these knobs. So you can have them move and dynamically change with the sound, which you can, like, once again, add a lot of character to your sound as well. Super cool. One example is, for example, once again, you can do a filter, so you can attach an LFO to the filter and add some more like voweliness to your sound, or you can change the what else can we do? Phaser, for example. I'm sure you guys know what a phaser sounds like. Kind of makes it sound weird, kind of like that. And right now it's moving on its own, but what if you want to give it its own custom movement? You can just change the which one is it? I think it is this knob. Yeah, and so now I can just attach this to the center, because you can see it kind of moves the shape around. And so now I can move the phaser however I please. So you can do a lot of cool things with this. I'm just going to be basic and boring once again, and just put a compressor on. If you've ever seen OTT, this is exactly the same thing. It's just going to, like any compressor, it makes the volume of the sound more consistent, which is very important, because oftentimes when you're building a song, you don't want every single instrument to be like just rapidly changing the volume and going crazy. You want things to kind of glue together, which is what this is really useful for. This mix knob kind of changes how strong the effect is. So if I turn it back up to 100%, and if I turn it off, you can see that first things first, it gets quieter, because like I said, it's compressing the volume. And you can kind of hear that it sounds smoother, like it sounds more pleasing, which is because it's kind of leveling out all the frequencies. It's making all the frequency ranges kind of the same volume. It's not your average compressor. It's actually compressing different frequencies separately. It's called a multi-band compressor. It's kind of complicated, so I'm not going to go into detail, even though I could talk about them for an hour. So I'm just going to turn it down maybe like a third of the way, just to give it some glue, but not a whole lot, because I still want the instrument to breathe. Like I said, you can mess around with this and set the amount to whatever you want, whatever sounds good. Use your ears. So actually, I'm going to close out a Vital for now, because I think I'm done with this chord sound. As basic it is, I think it kind of sounds nice. So I guess we can move on to a bass sound. So let's be lazy and just duplicate this for now. Now we have two Vitals. And for a bass sound, as you can imagine, I don't want the whole chord. I want just the bass. So I'm just going to go into like my little chord right here, and I'm just going to delete all the notes except for the bass. And I'm also going to put it down an octave. You'll see why later. It just will make the bass sound better. So now we can, what's the little thing? There we go. And now I can go back into Vital. And I'm actually, if you click these three bars right here, you can click Initialize Preset, and this will reset Vital to how it was when you first opened it up. So if you ever mess up, you turn a knob, you do something, and you're like, oh no, I messed up the sound. What do I do? Just, either undo, or you can, if you messed up really bad, you can do Initialize Preset, and it'll just send you right back to where you started. So, already not bad start, honestly. Like, that kind of sounds gritty and nice. So I'm just gonna keep rolling with this. Once again, I'm gonna be boring, stick with the saw wave. I'm gonna go back to the effects tab, and I'm gonna turn up the distortion. So there's a few types of distortion. We go with hard clip because here's the difference. So soft clip sounds like this. Hard clip sounds like this. Very subtle, but it just makes it the intensity of the distortion is even crazier with the hard clip. So it distorts the sound even more when compared to soft. There's some other options here. You can play around with them. They do some weird stuff to your sound. I just want to keep the sound somewhat the same so it doesn't sound too crazy different from what I started with. Just makes it sound beefier now. And here, let's go back to the noise oscillator, which, like I said, is really useful for layering. So let me turn it on, and you can see what kind of an effect it has in the sound. Whoa. Makes it sound really gritty. Kind of cool. The reason is because both of them are going through this distortion. So if I turn the distortion off, and turn this off, turn this up, it just sounds like a saw wave plus noise. Kind of boring. Turn the distortion back on. Now it doesn't sound like two separate sounds. It kind of glued them together. It made them something unique, something special. Kind of cool. So actually, let's once again glue the sound a little bit. So let's turn another compressor on, turn it down a little bit. Bam. So how does it sound like together? Let me just solo this and what's the button? Yeah, there we go. Not bad, not bad. Let's turn the bass down a little bit so it's not so overwhelming. Not too shabby if I say so myself. One thing that I do want to do is kind of do some basic mixing right now. So let's just open up EQ8. And turn the low pass filter on, sorry, the high pass filter on. So I'm putting this on the chord, so the sound right here. The reason is because you can see down here, there's a lot of low frequencies. Well, guess what? Our bass also has a lot of low frequencies. Now they're clashing, they're taking up the same space, which is how your mix will sound muddy. So in order to get rid of that muddiness, I'm just gonna high pass this, which gets rid of the low frequencies. Makes it sound kind of tinny, like it's coming out of like a phone speaker, kind of bad. But that's because it's on its own right now. So here's how it sounds like before, how it sounds like after. Pretty bad on its own, but when we layer it back with the bass sound, now it sounds pretty thick again, because the bass is now doing all the work that a bass should do, which is the bass frequencies. And this chord stuff, the chord synth that I just made, is now responsible for the higher frequencies. So it's pretty cool. Let me actually rename this so we don't forget. So this is chord, and this is bass. I just deleted it. There we go. Bass. All right, cool. Not a bad start. I'm gonna do a tiny bit more mixing, and this just looks really muddy frequency right around here. Maybe make it a little bit softer. There we go. Let's make it just sound a bit cleaner. Maybe also because same idea, now the bass is taking up, as you can see right here, the bass is now taking up the same frequency space as the chords. So I'm actually going to turn it down a little bit. So now the chords have a bit more room to breathe. And normally I'd also turn this down, the high frequencies down, but I kind of like how gritty the high frequency sounds. It adds a lot of texture to the sound, because here's how it sounds like without it. Pretty cool. So I'm going to keep the high frequencies, because normally I'll lower them a bit just to give the chords a bit more room to breathe. Yeah, cool. We already got like a pretty decent sound going, which is not bad. And if I play in context with the drums I added earlier, let me turn off the electric piano. And that bass note is way too low, so let's actually go back and turn this up a little bit. Up an octave. That sounds fine, I think. Yeah, so already not bad, right? That's something cool that you can show off or whatever. How much time do we have right now? You guys mind if I keep going, or up to you?
What are you planning to
No, let's do a little bit longer. We can make some funky sounds, because what I just made is boring. Let's do some fun stuff. Let's make some cool sounds. Yeah, let's make some like dubsteppy sounds, right?
Yeah,
So
I saw you were almost touching on the wavetable thing. You go anyway.
yeah, let's do that. So
Yeah.
let me just open up my phone, because I took some screenshots to help me out. Because sound design, is a really trial and error type thing. You will make a lot of bad sounds, like just straight up. Like some of them will sound like terrible, like garbage, but some of them will sound good. Save the ones that sound good, throw away the ones that sound bad, and eventually you'll have a collection of really nice sounding sounds. It's just the nature of sound design. Not everything you'll make will sound good. So I made a screenshot for myself so I can just get straight to the things that sound good, not to waste your guys' time. So let's add like a little cool like dubsteppy bass thing in the doodle. So yeah, let me just add another vital in there. So let's do vital. Bam. All right, let's make a cool dubsteppy sound. So first of all, let's find a really cool wavetable. These are called wavetables, by the way. I don't think I said that. The different shapes and stuff are called wavetables. So I actually wrote one down for myself. There's one that comes with Vital called Solar Powered, which is pretty cool. Sounds pretty weird, but here, let me actually draw in a note. So that way I don't have to constantly play a note on the keyboard. So it's, there we go, perfect. So if I go here, I probably want to play a lower note. Yeah, not that high, because we're making a bass. One more. There we go. All right, cool. So maybe solo that so we can hear it. All right, back to Vital. So let's hear what it sounds like as I move this knob. Ooh, pretty nice. That's already pretty cool. That's a really nice foundation already. So let's add an LFO on it. So I don't have to move it manually. Pretty cool already. Yeah, let's move on to actually, some other things I didn't show is that these two knobs, by default, they do absolutely nothing. Turn them all you want, they won't do anything. If I go to these little drop downs right here, I can actually select what I want them to do. And if all these look confusing to you, just click on it and turn the knob, and you can visually see what it does to the sound. It kind of stretches it in weird and cool ways. So it's kind of cool. So I can add an LFO on this knob. Let's do this shape, and let's make it faster too. No, that's probably too fast. Also, these little things I'm turning right here affects how much the LFO affects these knobs. So if I turn this up, the LFO will move the knob a lot. But if I turn this down, you can kind of see this green line, which tells me how much it'll move by. So if I turn it down, it won't affect the knob as much. So you can have a lot of control and finesse with this kind of stuff. That already sounds pretty cool. So yeah, let's move on to the effects tab. Let's add some distortion, because every dubsteppy bass needs some good distortion, right? Woo, not bad. Turn it down. And let's add some compressor just to glue the sound together once again. All right. And let me go back here. So the other thing I didn't explain is when you turn on the filters, you'll see that there's these these buttons right here. Basically, these tell the filter what they should filter, essentially. So for example, if I have none of these selected, the filter does nothing. If I select oscillator 1, which is this oscillator right here, now this filter is affecting this oscillator, and you can pick and choose what the filter filters, essentially. You can even have it filter the second filter right here, which is pretty crazy. So you can have double filter action if you want. So I'm actually going to make the filter steeper. I'm actually going to turn to a high pass, and you'll see why in a second. This is just from experience of making sounds. Let's throw a different LFO on there. Because right here, if you click on these, I can change the shapes of these LFOs and stuff. And now I can have different unique LFOs. So you can have different LFOs doing different shapes, doing different movements at different speeds, all working in tandem with one another to create a really cool dynamic sound. So, yeah, let's just do something cool. Not that, though. Yeah, so let's just mess around. You gotta really finesse a lot of these things. Like, they will sound bad at first, but if you just give it some time and just really finesse the knobs and stuff, you can create some cool stuff. What if I turn this the other way? Maybe squeeze or something? Not a big fan of that sound. Hold on. Now we're talking. Okay. The reason I added this filter is because it adds some like I said, remember how I said that this kind of adds some human mouth like vowel sounds? Guess what? I do want to add that to my sound, which is exactly why I'm turning this up right now. Because without this filter, it sounds really plain and boring. So it makes a pretty big difference. So I'm not a huge fan of how this is sounding right now. We can make it work.
This is the secret to dubstep crowds.
Yes.
There's table synths.
Exactly.
Like they're always like, how before you ever seen this, you have no clue.
Exactly. This is how Skrillex and Virtual Riot and all those other big names do it. So right now I'm adding a chorus because, like I said, you probably can't hear this well in this room, but this sound is very mono. Not a lot of stereo information. It sounds very boring if it's coming directly in front of you. I want it to surround your ears to really sound like it's coming from all around you. So let's add some chorus. And by default, the settings are like this. Now it sounds kind of washed out. I'm not a big fan. So let's turn on the voices. This basically affects how detailed the chorus sounds. So, let's also turn on the mix so it's not as crazy. And what's really cool is, once again, I can put an LFO on the knobs of the chorus. So now what's happening is the chorus changes over time how loud the chorus is. So at the peak of the sound, halfway through it playing, it sounds really wide. And back when the growl starts to end, it gets really mono again. So it kind of opens up and closes again. It's kind of cool. It's a really cool effect when you have headphones on or whatever. So yeah, just to really finesse how it sounds. Cool, whatever. The other thing I just noticed is that I'm cutting off a lot of the low frequencies, which is bad because you're making a bass. You want to have low frequencies to the bass. So we can actually add another oscillator. And let's just do a really basic sound. Sorry. Normally I'll do a sine wave, but this is basically a sine wave with just a little bit more oomph. Here, I can show you how it sounds like on its own. Let me turn off the distortion or whatever. So here, let me turn it back to sine. Sine wave you can almost barely hear because it's just one frequency at a very low range. I don't know if these speakers can even output that frequency. If I do this sound, now there's some more overtones, there's some more harmonic information. In fact, if I click this, you can kind of see this is like a frequency spectrum. If I turn it back to sine wave, just one frequency, turn it up, it's almost a sine wave, but there's a couple more, so it kind of lets you hear it a little bit better. It gives it more body, which is really nice. It's just something, like I said, that you just get over time with experience. The thing now is that before this was just going into the distortion, but now these two are this is also going to distortion, so now it's affecting the way the distortion sounds, which I don't like. Guess what? In Vital, you can change where this oscillator goes. So if I want, I can just have it go directly out. So it's bypassing all of these effects. It's not getting distorted, it's not getting coarse, it's not getting compressed. It's just the raw sound going straight out. And so now that gives the sound a bit more low frequency, some more sub bass essentially, which is nice. It's always good to have bass when you're making a bass. Let's see what else we can do. We can always add some noise just to fill up the space a little bit. Maybe not that much. Yeah, I'm just gonna hear how it sounds like in context now. Kind of loud. Yeah, and it sounds pretty okay right now. It's not my best growl, but like I said, trial and error, man. You just gotta try, turn knobs, see what happens, and you'll make some bad growls, you'll make some good growls. Just save the good ones, right? And that goes for sounds in general. One last thing I want to do is let's add some pitch bends. That way kind of doesn't just stay in one note, it's going to go or something, something crazy, something fun. So this right here tells the plugin how far it can bend. So if I set it to 12, that means it can bend all the way up to an octave and back down, which is exactly what I want. Also, this right here tells you how many notes I can play at the same time. So right now it's at 8, so I can play up to 8 notes at the same time. If I play ninth, it just won't play. If I turn it down to 1, now I just have, you can't hear it right now because I'm only playing one note to begin with, but if I play another note, then the first one just goes away because it can only play one note at a time, which you might sound, what's the point? I just want to play as many notes as I want. Sometimes for leads and for basses like this, you don't want more than one note playing. So this is like basically like a fail safe, so you don't accidentally play two notes and make it sound terrible. And also, when you have one note selected, you can also do this glide thing. So now if I turn it up so it's even more noticeable. See, now I play that initial note and it kind of slowly glides up to the second note I'm playing, which is really cool. You can do some cool things with that. So let's actually use that. So let me go back into MIDI and let's draw a note like right here. And let's make it shorter. Cool. So now, if I play it, now it goes down. Kind of cool. And we can change how fast it does that by, guess what? Changing the glide knob. So if I turn it down, it almost instantly goes down to the note. If I turn it up, now it takes time. Kind of cool. Yeah, so I can copy it, be lazy, and just move it up. No, sorry, move it. Sounds pretty gnarly, right? There we go. So it should sound okay. Yeah, it's fine. If I had time, I would make another sound that fills this area right here. But yeah, I think you guys should definitely try this out. Download Vital, it's free, like I said. I can help you guys install it. I know how to install plugins for Ableton and FL. And yeah, just turn some knobs and see what cool stuff you can make. Feel free to experiment. And instead of using presets and other people's sounds, you'll be able to make stuff that you can call 100% your own, because you made not only the melodies, the chords, the structure of the song, but also the sounds themselves, which is pretty cool. Like everything you hear except for the drums here, the stuff I just made right now. Pretty cool, right? So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can say about this right now. So yeah, definitely give it a whirl. See what you guys can do. Yeah.